Have you ever spent months reworking the same painting, convinced that if you just fix one more edge, adjust one more value, add one more detail, it'll finally be good enough? Only to step back and realize it looks overworked, muddy, and completely lifeless. This used to be me. I've had plenty of these commissions. I would create these controlled paintings that technically looked correct, but they had absolutely no soul. And no matter how many brush control exercises or technique videos I watched, I couldn't break free from this suffocating perfectionism that was killing my art. But then I discovered the real culprit. It wasn't my technique, it was my mindset. And in this video, I'm going to walk you through exactly how to break free from perfectionism so you can finally create those loose, expressive alla prima oil paintings that you've been dreaming of making. And here's the best part. This topic is really near and dear to me, so I've put together a complete PDF guide that walks you through the exact system I used for myself and for my students to help overcome perfectionism and create the kind of artwork you've been dreaming of and how exactly to unlock it. I'm going to link it in the description, so go ahead and grab your copy so that you can follow along and have this as a reference in your studio that you can refer back to over and over again. I really think it's going to be super helpful for structuring your overall painting practice. So now that you've gotten your guide, let me start by sharing exactly what perfectionism is and what it isn't, because most artists and creative people in general have it completely backwards. So according to researcher Brené Brown, perfectionism, it isn't about having high standards or striving for excellence. Healthy striving, as she describes it, is internally driven. So it comes from your own desire to grow and improve. But perfectionism, that's externally driven. And it's by one simple but all-consuming question: what will people think? Here's how this can show up in your painting practice. So you don't want to show anyone your work until it's perfect, even when it's technically finished. You rework paintings for months that could have been finished in hours. You're more worried about avoiding criticism than you are concerned with expressing yourself. And you'd rather create one perfect painting than 10 expressive ones that really feel like they're coming from your soul, your artistic voice. Does that sound familiar? I find that this is really common in the kind of artist who has a background of doing like really well in school. So the straight A student, the gold star child of the family, or just someone who is really used to achieving. So if you've had an entire career that's been really successful and you're turning to painting in retirement, well, you spent decades really becoming a master in whatever domain you were doing professionally, and it can feel really jarring to dive into something that you don't have decades mastering. I know this was absolutely the case for me. I am used to being maybe not the straight A student, but someone who would just naturally do well when diving into things. And the way this really showed up in my oil painting or just in my art in general, ever since I was like a little kid. I have this early memory of being probably like kindergarten age. So I don't know, maybe 5 years old. And a neighborhood friend of mine who was a few years older came and showed me how to make a cartoon of a girl's face. It was really simple. You know, it was probably no more than 10 lines with a ballpoint pen. And she asked me if I could copy her. And I couldn't. And I just remember bursting into tears. And, you know, as I got older in my teenage years, my only real definition of whether a piece was successful was whether it looked like a photograph, because I was so used to striving for some externally imposed standard. Like, if you answer all the right questions, you get 100 on this quiz. That painting or drawing, it kind of felt the same way, where I would feel like I needed to get all the right answers by getting every detail right down to the pixel and kind of sticking with photorealism in the process. So of course it yielded this situation where the only way a piece felt finished was to keep going into finer and finer detail until there just wasn't really any artistry left. I had just copied a photograph. So here's why perfectionism is the enemy of loose expressive painting. It really comes down to 3 reasons. First, it kills curiosity. So loose painting, it requires experimentation. It requires play. It requires discovery. But perfectionism tells you that you need to know exactly what you're doing before you put brush to canvas. It makes you afraid to explore because, well, what if you fail? In our education system, we are conditioned such that if we get a failing grade on a quiz or a test, somehow that carries with us for years, going on to our permanent record or affecting our GPA or impacting where we can go to college. It manages to help track which students are the fastest learners, but it doesn't necessarily track who has the deepest understanding of the material. And unfortunately, that really messes us up when it comes to art making. Because if we are afraid to fail, we're not actually going to experiment and explore. And that's really what creative art is all about. It's about doing something that's outside of the box. And you just don't venture outside of the box without kind of stumbling around in the dark and feeling for something new and different. Failing is a really integral part of this process. But if we're afraid to fail, well, paradoxically, we're going to fail to make something that feels truly artistic. Which brings me to the second way that perfectionism is the enemy of loose expressive oil painting, because it's about control, not expression. Loose painting is often about being pleasantly surprised by something unexpected that happens with your brush or your paint and embracing the unpredictable. Perfectionism, though, wants to control every mark, every edge, every value, which is the opposite of what creates that beautiful, spontaneous quality that we're after. And finally, I've said this already, but it's worth just solidifying. It makes you afraid of failure. But here's the truth. Failure is where you actually learn. Every failed painting teaches you something valuable about paint handling or color mixing or how to make your brush make the marks that you want to make. And you can't learn those just from reading about them in theory. You have to learn them through practice, through trial and error. Or another way, because that phrase, trial and error, is used so often that I think we've kind of lost sight of its meaning. It's through trying and failing. Trying and failing is what really helps us to build up an intuition for how our tools and materials respond and want to be handled to get certain results. And at the end of the day, when we talk about mastering oil painting or really becoming adept at Bravura brushwork or alla prima oil painting specifically, we're often imagining someone who is incredibly skilled at not just being able to create realism in an image, but having such an incredible handle of the paint and the brushes and the way the canvas performs and receives those paints and those brushes. That's really what mastery comes down to. And that mastery came from building an intuition with the tools, and that intuition with the tools is built through trying and failing. So if we're afraid of failure, by definition, we're going to hold ourselves back from mastery. When I talk about perfectionism, I really think of 2 students of mine, Robin and Julia. Both painters are so excited to loosen up, but they're also really bright, driven women who have had really full lives. And they have such high standards for themselves, for the artwork they want to make, for the artwork that they love. And strangely, this can kind of cause this paralysis in their own studios. And so as a result, I make mindset the very first thing that I address with new students that I work with. And I do go through this in that PDF as well, because it truly is so important. So after you watch this video, if you need a reminder or you want to know what you can practically do to help tackle perfectionism, make sure you have grabbed that copy of that PDF so that after this video, you're not just listening to something that'll keep you company in the studio, but you're actually taking meaningful steps to address this in your own artwork. But I do want to share a couple of practical strategies in this video that you can start implementing as well. And I'm going to begin by sharing a story that completely changed how I approach my painting practice. I made this change back when I was still a full-time corporate office worker, and I was painting on the side. And this one change allowed me to actually make painting my full-time career. So definitely pay attention to this one because this is huge. This is a story that I believe actually happened, but has now become a little bit of a parable. There are a couple different versions of this story, some involving potters, some involving photographers, but regardless of the specifics, it is fundamentally teaching us the same lesson. So, a ceramics teacher divided his class into two groups. The first group in this ceramics class at the end of the semester would be graded solely on the quality of the work that they produced. So in order to get an A in the class, they just needed to produce one perfect pot. The other group would be graded on the quantity of work that they produced. So 50 pounds worth of pots would receive an A, 40 pounds of pots would receive a B, and so on. And at the end of the semester, something fascinating happened. The highest quality work came back from the quantity group. While the quality group sat around theorizing about perfection, the quantity group was busy just making pots, learning from their mistakes, and improving with each piece. And this is exactly what happens with painting. When you focus on creating more paintings rather than perfecting fewer paintings, you actually improve faster and create better work. I really learned this lesson the hard way. I used to spend months on single paintings, convinced that if I just had the right teacher, or I worked harder, or I pushed longer, or I watched the right video, or I refined more, that I would finally create something worthy. But those paintings always wound up half finished, and not to mention they just looked like overworked messes. Like they were truly not great. I would be embarrassed to share them, to be perfectly honest. But when I finally started focusing on painting frequency instead of painting perfection, I gave myself permission to complete paintings in single sessions. In fact, I made it a requirement. I didn't let myself succumb to that temptation of like, oh, I'll just keep working on this tomorrow and I'll make it even better. No, I told myself I had a hard limit. And the result is that I stopped reworking paintings to death. I embraced the good enough painting and I moved on to the next one. And you know what happened? My work not only got dramatically better, but I wound up producing enough work that I could have my first exhibition. It was a little pop-up, and I made enough money that I realized that I didn't actually need my day job anymore. I could make a living from this. So in the process, not only did I level up significantly, I really understood what my style was as a result, and in the process, I built up enough inventory that I could make money from this. It was truly a win-win-win. I think that's the right amount of wins. And I don't say this with the hopes that you're going to go out and start selling work or something like that. That's not really the point of this. The point is that focusing on quantity really was what produced quality. And it wasn't just some trade-off where I sacrificed the maybe depth of execution on the piece and got better. No, there were all these other tangential benefits too. So if you're on the fence about shifting gears and implementing something like this, I would really encourage you to do it. And I hope this example really proves that this is worth shifting in your own painting practice. My work got dramatically better in my case, and it wasn't because I lowered my standards, but because I was learning faster, experimenting more, and developing my instincts and intuition with my tools through repetition rather than overthinking. This is why alla prima oil painting is so powerful for breaking free from perfectionism for oil painters. When you're working wet into wet in a single session, you don't have the option to endlessly rework. You have to make confident decisions, trust your instincts, and embrace the paint's natural behavior. But here's what most artists don't account for. Successfully painting alla prima isn't just about technique. It's about having the right mindset and the right system in place. Again, this is exactly what I cover in that free PDF that I mentioned earlier. So I walk you through not just my complete system for overcoming perfectionism and getting your mindset really in the right place, but this is also something that is geared toward creating expressive alla prima paintings in general. So including specific exercises, mindset shifts, and then a step-by-step process that you can follow in your studio. But as we put all of this together, based on my experience in working with hundreds of artists, there are 3 essential pillars for creating loose, expressive work that I want to instill in this video. So pillar number 1 is to embrace the long game. Stop expecting every painting to be a masterpiece. Stop expecting everyone to be better than the next. You're naturally going to have ups and downs, highs and lows. Give yourself permission instead to create studies, experiments, and even failures. Each painting is just one step in your artistic journey. What matters most isn't that you're taking the perfect step each time, but that you continue to put one foot in front of the other. Pillar number 2 is to focus on frequency over perfection. So paint more often, finish paintings faster, and resist the urge to go back and rework or overwork. You'll learn more from completing 10 imperfect paintings than from perfecting 1. And finally, pillar number 3, trust the process. Alla Prima oil painting requires you to trust your instincts a little bit and let the paint do some of the work. It's not like pencil where you can control every little thing and erase the moment you mess up. So embracing this technique means loosening your grip on control and embracing the beautiful unpredictability that the oil paint and your brushes can produce. This is where some of the most beautiful effects have happened in my work, and I think you're going to be really excited by what it does in your work too, as soon as you let go of controlling everything. So if you're ready to break free from perfectionism and start creating loose, expressive oil paintings that you've been dreaming of, here's what I want you to do after you watch this video. First, download that free PDF that I mentioned. It contains everything you need to implement this system in your own studio practice, including specific exercises, mindset reframes, and a step-by-step process. Don't wait, go ahead and pause this video and grab it now while it's still fresh on your mind. Second, commit to painting more frequently. Instead of spending weeks on one painting, commit to completing one painting per week. Even if it's just a small study, you'll be amazed at how quickly you improve. And don't worry, this doesn't have to require a ton of time. When I was working my day job before, I was really only able to paint after hours, and I still had a life outside of work and painting. And the same thing goes for my most successful students. They don't have a full-time painting schedule. They aren't going to be drill sergeants about maintaining their studio practice X number of hours every single day. That's not what this is about. This is about using the amount of time you have to paint and using it to create more paintings. It's not about slavishly requiring yourself to just output more and more. So if you worry you don't have enough time to do this, I want to dispel that fear right now. This is just about using the time you already have more wisely and effectively. And third step, give yourself permission to fail. Your next painting, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't even have to be better than the one before. It just has to be finished. And then you move on to the next one. I can't tell you how often I have had a real breakthrough painting. And then I thought to myself, ooh, I can't wait to get back in the studio and paint the next one. If this one was so good, imagine what the next one's gonna look like. Thinking that every painting would have to be better than the last. And that's just not how it works. Not only that, but the paintings that would often predict the breakthrough, they were often really rough. So right before I would have an amazing breakthrough painting, I would often have one where I really struggled. And the struggles that came out in that painting were the lessons that I needed to set myself up for success on the painting that would ultimately be the award winner, or the one that would immediately sell once I put it online. And finally, remember, expressiveness isn't a talent that you're born with. It's a skill that you can develop with the right system and the right mindset. This is something that is near and dear to me. Great painting isn't about some natural inborn talent or just having a naturally more creative voice than other people. This is part of why I have created the approach that I share with my own students. This is the same approach that I talk about all the time on my channel. And don't worry, it's the same one that's in the PDF too. When you follow it, you're going to start creating work step by step that not only is more aligned with your goal, it feels more expressive and creative. What you're lacking isn't that natural, innate talent. It's simply that you're lacking a clear system to help get you there. And that's what I really want to give to you in this video today. So I can't wait to see what you create. Once you start implementing these principles, let me know in the comments how it impacts your painting practice. Or if you just want to comment now what impact you think it'll have or what you're excited to try out, let me know that in the comments too. It's always really helpful for me to hear what resonates with you all. And if you have questions that come out of it, definitely ask me in there too, because the ideas that you share with me in the comments, they really are what's steering the videos that I make. And I want to make sure that I'm sharing things that are most helpful for all of you. I can't wait to hear how it goes. And until the next video, happy painting, everybody.